All right, so today we're going to begin talking about the prophecies of Daniel. And these prophecies, the book is really broken into two sections. The first section are stories of faith, which is chapters 1 through 6, and then chapters 7 through 12 go through prophecies that Daniel had during this time. It gets kind of weird because you think of books of the Bible being chronological. This one's not chronological. The prophecies begin before the fall of Babylon. And so remember, the last two chapters were after the fall of Babylon, or at the fall of Babylon with the writing on the wall, and then Daniel going to the lion's den during the time of Darius, which would have been during the time of the Medes. So normally when we look at the Bible, we think of the books being from the beginning to the end. You see that in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Exodus through Deuteronomy are kind of intertwined, but progressively the books just kind of go through in a linear fashion, chronological. But Daniel kind of jumps around a little bit. And part of that is it's just hard to describe two things happening at the same time. Hey, I'm talking to the king and I'm having a dream. I'm talking to the dream and I'm having a king, right? It's hard to do that. And so the stories are broken into, this is what happened at this time. And we know from Scripture when he had these dreams or these visions, because it says in the first year of Belshazzar, in the 5th year of Belshazzar, in the whatever year of Darius, it talks about him having these dreams or these visions at that time. So we can date when these visions came, but they weren't visions that came sequentially throughout at the end of the book. And if I remember correctly, these are the only book, or the prophecies were written in Aramaic, not in Hebrew. There's a lot of controversy in the I'll call it the religious world, about when these particular chapters were written, partly because they are written in Aramaic, they're not written in Hebrew. But the other reason is because of how well these books match history. Some say that they were written during the Maccabean period to give the Jews some hope that God would deliver them from the persecution and tyranny that was happening during that time frame. And the reasoning they give for that is there's no way Daniel could have known what he knew about the events to occur later unless these were written or after the fact and attributed back to Daniel. Because particularly when you start talking about the kings of the north and the king of the south, the events there match what happens in Greece so well, you can literally line it up to history and say, okay, here it is, here it is, here it is, here it is. And you can just watch it happen in real time in history based on the text that's written in Daniel. And so many critics say there's no way it could have been written when it was written. Now, I don't believe those critics. I think God can give us that type of prophecy with that kind of accuracy at any time for any event. Look at what he did with Cyrus in Isaiah 40 or 41. He actually talks about King Cyrus, allowing the Jews to go back to rebuild the temple. What happened? 150 years after that was written, King Cyrus allows the Jews to go back and rebuild the temple. If God can name a specific ruler 150 years before the event, God can tell us what's going to happen with other rulers, can't he? And so there's no basis for saying that, there's no historic basis for saying that Daniel was written after the fact. Daniel absolutely could have been written and likely was written by Daniel. Daniel was writing to a Jewish audience who, at the time of the Maccabean revolt, would have been primarily speaking more of an Aramaic language, maybe not as much Hebrew. He was told to seal these up for future events. Very likely he would have written them in Aramaic because that's what God would have told him to do. So there's absolutely no reason to say that these were written after the fact. When you start looking at the way some of these are interpreted, if you look at the way these 6 chapters are, just in context of the chapters, context of the entire book, much of what you read in the prophecies of Daniel would apply to the Medes, the Medes and Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. There's very little indication that any of this goes past that period. Now, some of it does make, if you think about it in terms of second coming of Christ, you could read that into some of this text very easily, and many people do. But I don't think that's the primary purpose of Daniel's writing of these 6 chapters. These 6 chapters look to be for encouragement and for the plight of the Jews, and just letting the Jews know that through this time of persecution, there will come a time where it will end. The chapter we're going to go through today, chapter 7, talks about 4 beasts. And in this chapter of the 4 beasts, there does appear to be some references to maybe the Christian persecution during the time of Domitian, and we'll get into that towards the end of the day. But with that, why don't we go ahead and start by, we'll just read the chapter, and then we'll jump right in. So in the first year of King Belshazzar of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then I looked at its wings were plucked off. And it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, arise and devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this, in the night of visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke into pieces, in pieces, and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which the 3 horns were plucked up by its roots. And behold, in the horn were eyes like that of a man, and a mouth speaking many great things. Then he talks about the Ancient of Days. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days was in his seat. His clothes were white as snow, and his hair like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire came out from before him, and thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. I looked then, because the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and language should serve him. His dominion was an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall never be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. The four great beasts are four kings who shall rise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever and ever, forever and ever. Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, which devoured and broke into pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up before it, before which 3 of them fell. And the horn that had eyes and a mouth and spoke great things, and seemed greater than its companions. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came, and the judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall rise, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and he shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and law. And they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and a half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. The kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom. His dominion shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. So you can see a lot of things happening in this chapter, right? You see 4 beasts. Where have we seen something like that before? How about chapter 2? We had the statue with the different types of materials. They represented what? Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. This has 4 pieces to it as well. The first one, Babylon, there's 4 kingdoms. Babylon, the Medes and Persians, Greece, and Rome. There's kind of a parallel there between the 2. The first one had wings so it was a head or a body of a lion and wings of an eagle. These are kind of our we call them like the king of the beasts. The eagle is, a majestic animal. They think of them as very majestic type symbols, and they're used in apocalyptic literature in that way as well. Babylon also used images of lion with eagle's wings in many of their artwork, and some of their steles show that even today. Likely this was to represent Nebuchadnezzar as the eagle, or as the lion, and the eagle's wings could have been 2 things. It could have been how fast he took over the world, because he did it fairly quickly. But it could also represent the co-regency of Nodonus and Belshazzar. Could be either one of those. I'm not sure which is more appropriate. That particular kingdom was taken from Belshazzar, and so it could be the eagle's wings being plucked. Could just be the kingdom being divided among or conquered during the time of his rule. Excuse me. Okay, we have a second beast in here as well. And this beast came out of the sea, and it resembled a bear with one side raised up. So you can just kind of picture this bear. It's a really big bear, and maybe 2 feet are small and 2 feet are big, but it's one side is definitely bigger and stronger than the other side. It's interesting that that's brought up because the Persians were a much stronger force in the Medo-Persian Empire than the Medes. And so you can see, in this, you can see that the Medo-Persian Empire with both of them in power, but one side stronger than the other. So your bear is leaning to the side. It's got one side lifted up because it's stronger than the other side. The 3 ribs could have multiple meanings. Oftentimes in ancient literature and apocalyptic literature, the number 3 represents something of a spiritual nature. And it could be the case here that the 3 ribs could represent that the Medes and Persian Empire is being built up and allowed to do these things through the power of God. Now that fits in perfectly with what we see in the first 6 chapters of the book, right? In the first 6 chapters, we see God in control. We see God doing these wonderful things. And through these wonderful things, we see God just continually saying, I'm in control. The kingdoms aren't stronger than I am. I'm stronger than the kingdoms. And in the end, I'm going to get my way. It could be that. And I think that fits very nicely in with just the rest of the book. It's also interesting that there were 3 basic empires that the Medes and Persians conquered. They conquered Egypt, Lydia, and Babylon. So I see 2 ways that those 3 ribs could be interpreted. It could be a physical interpretation of these are what they're going to conquer, or it could be that God is in control and God is the one who's going to put them in charge, and God is going to be the one that's going to displace the Babylonians by putting them in that place. I think both are valid, and I think both could be true at the same time here. Anybody have any thoughts? No? Okay. Let's keep going. The third beast. The third beast was like the one of a leopard. And this one refers to the Greek Empire. It has 4 wings on its back. So if the 2 wings of the Babylonian Empire was to represent the speed in which Nebuchadnezzar conquered the world, you could safely say that in this case, it's telling us that the Greeks are going to do it even faster. And in fact, Alexander did conquer the world faster than Nebuchadnezzar did. He conquered the world from Asia Minor to India in 13 years. That's a very short period of time. I think World War II lasted longer than that, I guess maybe not. It was a very short period of time to conquer that much world, especially when you consider their means of transportation were horses and foot. They covered a lot of ground very quickly and conquered a lot of ground with primitive weapons, just like that. And so you see Alexander does exactly that. He just comes in and wipes everybody out. You also notice this particular beast has how many heads? 4. And 4 heads on the beast is kind of unique there too. How many generals did Alexander have in his army? 4. He had 4 of these generals in his army. Those 4 generals, after Alexander died, Alexander's child was too young to be king. He was still an infant when Alexander died. The kingdom was divided into 4, one for each of those generals. And that's going to become important later on, because those 4 kingdoms they'll start having some problems between them, particularly the king of the north and the king of the south. And you'll see alliances built and torn apart and battles between them as we get into later prophecies of Daniel. Okay, now we've got the 4th one. This 4th one sounds kind of scary. So the fourth beast it's not identified as an animal. Instead, it's just identified as being terrifying and mighty and strong, with teeth of iron and 10 horns. What do you think that means? Teeth of iron. What could that possibly be? It's the strength of its military. This was going to be the strongest militarily of all of the different kingdoms. And this kingdom was going to just span everything and just wipe everything out and make its own kingdom as it went. So this one is very different than the other ones. And where did I go? There we go. So this one is told it's just going to devour everything. It breaks everything into pieces, and it's very, very, very strong. The Roman Empire did exactly that. It had the greatest military might in the world when it began getting its power and strength. It conquered the entire world. It created paths for its soldiers to quickly get from point A to point B. It created roads, and it used those roads for military use and for military might. Now, other people use them as well, but the primary purpose of those roads was to just transport people from point A to point B for efficiency and military use. Now, it also said that this beast had 10 horns. Have we seen horns in other places in the Bible? Maybe in Revelation, there's a beast with horns. Horns are typically, in apocalyptic literature, they're used for power or for a king or some authority. So this has 10 horns, so you can think of 10 authorities, and then those 10 authorities get broken. After those 10, there comes an 11th, and the 11th's a bad one here. What does it say about the 11th one? The 11th one, okay, so he shall be different from the former ones. He shall put down 3 kings. So again, you can see the number 3 coming in here as well. Likely here used for spiritual intervention or spiritual matter. And what does this king do, or this horn? Speaks words against the Most High, wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times of the law. So this guy is going to be, he's going to be rough. He's going to be persecuting people. This is kind of cool. The first 10 emperors in Rome, Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, and Titus. Okay, Nero was a pretty bad guy. He did some pretty rough things. Caligula was also pretty bad. So they're not all great people, but there's 10. Now, we believe John wrote the Revelation while he was on the island of Patmos, somewhere between 90 and 95 AD. At that time, we saw Christian persecution happening far beyond anything that had happened before that, even worse than what Nero did. And that particular emperor was declared to be God by the Senate. And they've changed laws to make it so that this emperor was to be worshipped and treated as God and Savior of the world. Now, Christians, of course, had a problem with this, right? And so Christians rebelled, or Christians refused, and Christians were persecuted heavily during that time. John writes heavily about the persecution of the saints and getting justice for the saints, and the saints in heaven saying, Lord, how long are you going to let this happen? That king would be the king number 11, Domitian. So here in Daniel, you can make a pretty good argument that the 10 horns were the first 10 kings or emperors of Rome. And the 11th horn was the one who really kicked up the persecution of the Christians somewhere in the late 80s or early 90s. Isn't that interesting? No, that was Domitian. So Nero was one of the first 10. And Nero was not good to Christians. Nero used Christians to light the path to his garden at night. He hung them on posts, tarred them during the day, and then at night he lit the tar on fire with them alive. He was not a nice person. Domitian made what Nero did look gentle. Domitian was a very, 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 very bad man. And more importantly, Domitian claimed to be God, which is exactly what this said would happen as well. Speak for the Most High. So you could think of that as this man is claiming that what he says is what God says, so he is God. And so it's interesting to see this play out through history. We see, it was written during the time of Babylon. We see the Babylonians shown as kind of like the first dream that Nero had. The head of gold, hey, this is a really great empire. Lion and with eagle's wings. This is a really great empire. This is strong, it's mighty, it's majestic. And then the next one, the bear. Again, it's a strong thing, right? And then the leopard. Leopards are pretty quick, but you put the wings on its back, now it's really fast. And it's divided. It had 4 heads. Those 4 heads became 4 different kingdoms. And this final one is this one is no joke. This is the one that crushes the world. And the Romans definitely crushed the world. And then you see it just go a little bit further from there and say, hey, he's going to take the saints and he's going to persecute the saints. And this particular kingdom is going to, it's going to be a hard time on the saints until this particular time is done. The times and a half a time. So it says there's going to be a time of persecution of the people of God. But that time of persecution will come to an end. And when it comes to an end, you'll see this kingdom start to be killed. And that's exactly what we see happen in history. It's really the 10 kings and the 10 horns. When I read that, I kind of, as I read the text, I saw 10 kings or 10 horns and the 10 kings of the kingdom. I went to Wikipedia. I'm like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, well, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And it just kind of hit me that Domitian actually was the 11th king, and he was the one that likely really started the persecution of the Jews around 90 AD, right about the time John was talking about the persecution coming. The interpretation of this one is given to us, so we don't have to guess what the interpretation is. And the interpretation pretty much is exactly what we just went over. We've got 3 kingdoms that are going to come, and then a 4th kingdom. The 4th kingdom is going to be mighty and very powerful. There's going to be 10 kings, and the 11th king is going to come, and then in that time we'll see persecution. And then that kingdom will be destroyed and killed, and the other 3 will remain for a time, but they won't have any power. And Babylonian, Median Persian, and Greek cultural influence lasted for quite some time, and Greek influence is still even around today. We do see that play out in history exactly the way Daniel wrote it. Very, very, very interesting to see Daniel could write this stuff 400 years ahead of time. And it came true exactly the way Daniel had predicted it would come true. It's also interesting here, in chapter 2, Daniel was able to interpret the dream, right? He was able to tell Nebuchadnezzar what the dream was, and he could interpret it. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he was disturbed, and he couldn't sleep. Chapter 4, he had another dream, and he was disturbed, and he couldn't sleep. Daniel's dream, he couldn't interpret it. He had no idea what it meant. All he knew was it was disturbing him, and he couldn't sleep. He was agitated all night. And just like Nebuchadnezzar had to go to Daniel for interpretation of his dreams, Daniel, in this dream, had to go somewhere else for the interpretation of the dream. Isn't that interesting? I don't know if it means anything, but I found it interesting to see the similarity here, that the person who has the dream couldn't figure out what the dream meant. And so Daniel had to go to one of the angels or one of the people standing before the throne to say, what is this? A couple more things to talk about with this dream. The kingdom, or the king had the Ancient of Days sat on his seat. Who's the Ancient of Days? It's God. God is the Ancient of Days. And here his throne is fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire, and a stream of fire came out before him. So you can think of the stream coming out before the king, before God, the king, and this is a lake or a river of fire. In Revelation, there's also a river coming from the throne. It's a river of water. We call it the river of life. That river was for peace and for the benefit of the saints. This one is for judgment. So you can see the judgment being given down on this 4th kingdom through God. So the books are opened. Have we seen books being opened in the Bible before? In Revelation, we have the book of life, and that's opened. Here, the books are being opened, and judgment is beginning. The judgment is being represented by fire. Fire is used as judgment in apocalyptic literature often. The lake of fire, the fire here, fire consuming, it's often used as just a symbol of some judgment coming or some judgment being handed down. And that's the case here. Daniel is being told this 4th kingdom is going to be judged, and it's going to be destroyed through judgment. Anybody have any thoughts or comments before we jump on some questions? There's a lot to consume in this, and I know I went a little fast. So any thoughts about this book or this chapter?
Sometimes I just kind of wonder why they use these
Yeah, the figurative language of Daniel and the beast, rather than just saying, hey, there's going to be 4 kingdoms.
But, I guess when we dream, we look at some of our dreams, and sometimes they're kind of crazy too. I always thought it was preparing you for Revelation, where you think you don't understand that.
John leaned heavily in Daniel when he wrote Revelation. You see a lot of the same figures and imagery in Revelation. You see beast, you see horns, you see the scene around the throne. Right here, you see the scene around the throne. You see multitudes, tens of thousands and tens of thousands. You can think of that as an infinite number of people or beings, not necessarily people, around the throne of God. And you see the throne room, and you see the majesty. Now that's expanded on in Revelation, but it is here as well. You can see that room, and you can see that room where judgment is being handed out to this fourth kingdom. So yes, this absolutely prepares someone to read Revelation. And both this and Revelation, there was a gentleman who taught at Oklahoma Christian, Stafford North. He did a lot of stuff about Revelation. In fact, he wrote some books on it. And whenever he'd speak, he'd say, okay, this book, this is what it says, this is what it means. And he was talking about it because, people try to read it, and this as well, in a very literal sense. And you can't read apocalyptic literature literally. It's figurative speech. The 4 beasts, they're not 4 physical beasts. They're 4 different kingdoms. But people read this literature often as literal, especially when you get into Revelation. And he kept reminding his audience, it's figurative. Here's what it's saying here, and here's what it actually means. There are pieces there that are literal. The throne room of God, for example, I believe that really is, that's not a literal or a figurative speech. That really is the throne room of God. But many of the pieces that you read in both the last half of Daniel and in Revelation is very figurative language, and it's hard to read it if you don't read it in a figurative way.
One sentence from the key takeaway, no matter how powerful or blasphemous earthly rulers become, God's people will ultimately share in his everlasting. That kind of sums it up.
Yeah, let me grab mine here so I'll reiterate that for you, so for the microphone. No matter how powerful or blasphemous earthly rulers become, God's people will ultimately share in his everlasting glory. It's true then, it's true now. It was true in the time of Daniel, it was true in the time of John. Yeah, being figurative doesn't give it away. It allows the events to occur as they're described to occur. If he had said, the Medes and Persians are going to take over the kingdom of Babylon in 539 BC, as Belshazzar is having a banquet and the Medes and Persians are coming in to surround Babylon, Belshazzar might have had a different approach at his banquet, right? Instead of a banquet, he might have been out there fighting the Medes and Persians. But being figurative, it's easy for us to look back and see what happened in history, but the people in that time aren't impacted or influenced by that particular prophecy. That's kind of what I suggest. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and You know, that was certainly true in the time of Revelation as well. Daniel, John was writing to Christians who were living a very real persecution at that time. The language he used, he leaned on Daniel because his readers would have understood Daniel. They would have been able to read his letter of Revelation and quickly identified, okay, you're talking about beast here, okay, kingdom, okay, you're talking about horns, okay, kings. They would have gotten all of that right away. The Romans, who were not familiar with Daniel, would have never got it. And so John leaned on this book heavily for that reason, so that his readers could understand the message, but the people he was writing about wouldn't understand it. And so, that was a way to maybe loosen or lessen the impact of the persecution of the time, and just remind the Christians that, yes, it's happening, it's going to happen, it's going to get really bad, but in the end, God is going to prevail. The message here in Daniel 7, it's going to get bad, but in the end, God is going to prevail. And God is going to set up his kingdom that will never be destroyed. Just like that kingdom in the chapter 2 smashes the rest of them, the stone. Here it's reiterated again too. God is setting up his kingdom and it'll never be destroyed. Okay. Do we have any closing thoughts? No? Okay. Next week we'll jump into chapter 8, and then 10, 11, we get to 10, 11, and 12, and that's going to get pretty wild. There's a lot to go through with those. So one of those might break into two weeks. We'll see. Right now we'll plan on keeping them as 1 week per class, but a couple of those might be enough information that we might have to just break it into maybe two chapters into three weeks. I don't know. But we'll get through it. It's all fun stuff here. So why don't we go ahead and close with a word of prayer. Kingdom, and that with him we can rule with you forever. Father, we thank you for this time together, and we pray that you will bless us all as we go into our worship service. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.